Hello, you gorgeous teacher. Welcome to Everything EFL. If you're one of my lovely regular listeners, welcome back. If you're brand new to Everything EFL, you are most welcome, and I hope you stick around. This week, my guest is Kate Clifton, also known as Kate Languages, which is the name of her podcast. She's a modern foreign language teacher. She teaches languages to language teachers and delivers training on a range of topics like phonics, stretch and challenge, and how to exploit a text in a number of different ways. She also creates lots of teaching resources. Now, this week we're going to be talking about the pressure that teachers are under when it comes to exams. Even if you work in a language school where there aren't that many exams, think about this. We're going to be talking about lots of stuff like what you can include that isn't just delivering the syllabus content. So whatever kind of teacher you are, I think you will find this episode very useful. Enjoy! I'm Erin O'Byrne and welcome to Everything EFL podcast. I'm passionate about serving teachers and I offer training for schools and institutions whose language teachers need a little refresher, a change of mindset and some super practical ideas to put into their classrooms straight away. There is no one-size-fits-all lesson plan, but you've got a friend and support system in me. I can help reduce your overwhelm, give you some teacher inspiration, and improve your work-life balance. How? With some solid advice, takeaways you can try out immediately, and some much-needed teacher love, because your well-being is important too. Are you ready to make small changes one step at a time and remember how amazing you are? Let's go. Hi, Kate. How are you?
I'm good, thank you, Erin. How are you?
I'm great. Thank you for coming on to Everything EFL.
Oh, no, I'm really excited to talk to you.
That's brilliant. Now, I think the reason we can have an interesting chat, first of all, is because even though you are what I would describe as a mainstream school teacher and I'm from a private language school kind of background, first of all, you do have an ELT background as well. And also, I'm really interested in bridging that gap between what I know and what I've learned and that kind of twice a week 45 to 55 minute kind of space that you guys have to actually teach the language. So I think that we can have a really interesting conversation. So
yeah, definitely.
Can I just ask what your experience is of teachers who have exams at the end of the year? What do they tend to focus on and what do they tend to forget about?
That is such an interesting one. So, I mean, yeah, very much. The British education system is very focused on final exams at the end of year 11. And sometimes it feels like the whole curriculum is geared towards these exams. Yeah, I think when you're in it, you know, when you're just kind of doing it every day, you think this is the only way of doing it. And you get so involved and you're really, really focused on the exam and how to pass the exam. And I think the more you kind of step away from it and realize like, actually, you know, is it, I mean, obviously exams are extremely important, but equally, I think sometimes we focus too much on it. I don't know. I mean, what's your experience? What do you think?
From the work that I did in French Guiana last year, the stress level was incredibly high. And I was there in November and the teachers were like, the exam's in May, we have to get them ready for the exam. And it was like just stress and panic. Now, I think obviously this influences the teacher's mindset throughout the year. I think that it causes massive stress, anxiety, over preparation, but to the detriment of sort of forgetting about a lot of the essential, what I would call the essential things. Like I remember asking one of my teachers, she had kind of a mix of nationalities from South America in her class. And we were talking about a particular student and I said, well, where's he from? And she said, I don't know. And I'm like, okay, well, so she'd just gone first day straight in. We need to pass the exams. This is what we need to do. Here's some language kind of thing. There was no sort of getting to know the students, creating any kind of trust or rapport. But at the same time, like you say, you're in it. There's no headspace.
Yeah. And it's incredibly stressful. And I think, I'm not sure what the situation is in other countries, but I know in England in particular, there is so much pressure from above. So whether that's your line manager, whether that's your senior leadership team, whether that's governors, in the school, whether that's Ofsted, whether, even right up to the government, league tables, all that kind of thing. There is so much pressure from above. And if you're not seen to be teaching to the exam, you have to answer questions, well, why? Why do they not know exactly how to do the speaking exam by, the second term of year 10 or something like that, which is like a whole year before they actually have to do the speaking exam. So I can totally understand why teachers do it. And, I mean, a lot of the work I do now, I write teaching resources, and a lot of that is gearing towards practice and revision for the GCSE exams because it's really, really important. But I think that the really interesting question is, why are you learning a language? And in many ways, one of the reasons I love language teaching as well is because it is a real world skill. You can learn all this stuff in a classroom, and then you can go to a country and put it all into practice and realize that, this is just everyday life for people speaking these languages. And I think maybe you need to find a bit of a balance between thinking, okay, you do need to pass an exam, but also if you're actually traveling to France or Spain or Germany or whichever language you're learning, and you want to communicate with people, you're not going to start asking them what their school day is like, which is one of the classic GCSE topics or something like that. You want to be able to have these transactions and have proper, meaningful conversations with people. So yeah, it is a tricky one though, and I'm not criticizing languages teachers in any way, because I don't think it's them. I think it's the system.
Absolutely. Actually, I saw a brilliant Instagram reel of someone in Ireland saying, if the Irish exam reflected real life, he's like, "Hi, my name is Porrig. I have one sister. I go to the cinema on Saturdays with my mum. Her name is Carol. She's 52." And it was just because I remember doing that when I did French and German. But you're under, like you say, you're under so much pressure. But coming back to what you said about, language being a real world skill, it is. But if you are able to connect it to your students' world, like there has to be some kind of relevance or connection to your students. Otherwise, they don't see the point. And that's another thing that I heard quite a bit when I was in French Guiana is my students don't see the point.
Yeah, and again, I think, so having taught English as a foreign language, I mean, yes, that, they don't always want to do it, and there is always a bit of a lack of motivation, but I feel like it's a completely different thing because English is an international language. Most kids kind of get the idea, I think, that they need to learn it. When you're thinking about British children learning French or German or Spanish, there is a real attitude of, why do I need to do this? And then it doesn't actually always help when they go on a holiday to the country. I was actually speaking to someone. So I also, all these different things I do, all the strings to my bow. I also teach languages to languages teachers, which people always think is a bit strange, but quite often languages teachers will be teaching a language that they're not necessarily particularly fluent in or confident in, and I do classes with people to improve their confidence. And I was literally chatting to somebody yesterday about how difficult it is when you go to Germany and you speak fluent German and you want to practice your German, and then they figure out your English and then they just speak English to you. And actually everybody in Germany these days tends to, I mean, obviously not every single person, but I find Germany is more like somewhere like Holland or Denmark or Sweden or somewhere where, you just expect everybody to speak English now. So and that's really, really hard. So if people have the experience of traveling to these countries and thinking, oh, well, everyone speaks English anyway, how do you get that motivation across for them to realize that it is a useful skill and it's a great thing to be able to do, to speak foreign languages?
It's a toughie. I don't think we're going to solve that in the next 20 minutes, but I do, obviously that student engagement is important. But do you think that, and this is something I said to my teachers in French Guiana, and do you know what? They were so relieved I said it. I said, I think you're going to have to let go, and you're going to have to accept the fact that if you've got A0, A1 students in your class and you have to get them to pass an exam that's more like B1, I think you're just going to have to accept that you cannot work miracles. And you're not going to be able to help every student. And it was like this collective kind of, like this sort of almost like a sigh of relief. You could see the weight almost being lifted. Now, I don't know whether that helped when they went back in the classroom, but just that validation. I do think teachers, what's your opinion of what I said to them?
Absolutely. No. I really agree with that. And I think, again, there's so much pressure from people, and the culture has changed so much in the past few years of that it seems to be the teacher's fault if the students don't pass the exam.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think giving people permission to, to just take that on board and think, yes, not everybody is going to become fluent in any foreign language. And not everyone is going to pass an exam. So yeah, no, I think that's a great thing to say. I do wonder if you tried to say that to British secondary school teachers, whether they would say, yeah, but I will get even their pay can be related to the children's performance. So
Really? My
yeah,
God. That's
it's
so
so much
much pressure. So sticking with the theme of pressure, like, obviously we completely understand when teachers are totally focused on the exam, but to the detriment of everything else. What's your opinion on delivering just the syllabus content? What sort of other things should we be focusing on as well, even just for 5 minutes in a lesson?
Yeah, so I've been thinking a lot more about this actually recently. And I had some questions I answered on a recent episode of my own podcast about culture. And again, I think it's almost a bit different in the EFL world to the MFL world, but MFL being modern foreign languages, which is what we tend to call sort of, we to teach French, German, and Spanish. In that, to me, culture is an enormous part of learning a foreign language. I think you can't really understand a language if you don't understand the culture.
Yeah.
Because there are certain idioms or there's certain turns of phrase that you actually need to have a bit of background knowledge and understanding of a country and understanding of almost like a bit of history and background and all that kind of stuff to really, really get to grips with the language. And I also think it's really interesting, learning about, so I don't know, thinking about things that you're interested in your own language and finding out that type of thing exists in another language. So I don't know, something like rap music, if they really sounded very old, rap music.
That newfangled hip hop.
that newfangled thing. But yeah, the types of music genres that they might be interested in, to find out that there are these like really cool French rap artists. Or I taught in London for a while, and it's obviously extremely multicultural, and to talk to kids about, North African countries where they speak French, and to show them, there's a great film that I can't remember what it's called, sorry. But it's a really, really good film that's set in North Africa in the Second World War. And the students whose background was from North Africa, from possibly English speaking countries or other countries in North Africa, were really shocked. And then there was a bit of Arabic in the film, and they could understand it because they've, that's their background and their heritage and things like that. So I think incorporating all that kind of history and culture and background. I think sometimes when we think of culture, we focus on festivals, which is
and
great.
meal times.
Yeah, festivals of food. But there's so much more to it. And I really think it's about finding out what your students are interested in and then kind of taking it down that route. And again, that is very, very difficult to do when you have such constrained time and, your curriculum is just like, just focus on the exam. But I really think there is space in the curriculum to do it. I think, teachers in British secondary schools, particularly, and I'm sure they're the same all over the world, work extremely hard, and there's a hell of a lot to do. And they're always, they've always just got so much to do and they're so busy. But I think embedding this kind of thing, I do talk about embedding quite a lot because I don't like the idea of like, oh, you need to do a bit of culture as a bit of an add-on.
Yeah.
I think to embed it into your planning and your curriculum design and all these types of things, it's absolutely essential. So do you agree on the culture point?
I do. And I've just been thinking about, I've got a beginner class and they're from all over, and we've just done like the obligatory furniture, prepositions of place, but I might actually design a little quiz about Irish houses, like, are Irish houses big or small? Things like that. So I can, again, just incorporating a little bit of Irish culture in there somehow. So you're reviewing the language, but you're giving it a different spin, a different context, and they're also learning something. Still
Yeah.
running around in my head. I'll figure it out by tomorrow morning.
And
Um,
you know, simple comparatives like,
yeah,
you know, is this house, I don't know, an Irish house compared to a house from where they're from? Is this house older or newer than your house? Is
yeah,
it
yeah.
bigger or smaller? Or, you know, things like that. Yeah, definitely.
Okay, that's my lesson sorted for tomorrow. Um,
I'm glad to be of assistance.
Thank you very much. I also think there's definitely room for a little bit of pronunciation. Again, embedding it, but I think you can have a lot of fun with pronunciation if you can get the students to talk, because that's another complaint that I do get as well, is a lot of them are like afraid to talk. But that's the thing with pronunciation. You can do sort of choral stuff where they don't necessarily have to do anything individual. And there's so many silly little games you can play with it, and it's just, stuff they need to know anyway. How do you feel about like mindset, confidence building, things like that?
Oh, that's a great question.
Community.
Yeah. I think building an atmosphere in a classroom where students aren't afraid to speak out and make mistakes is essential, but also
Mm.
extremely difficult. And it's something that takes time. And I think sometimes we're after quick fix solutions and really understanding, again, embedding it every single lesson so that I mean, yeah, I know there is like 1,000 things to think about every lesson, aren't there?
Yeah, oh
But
God.
yeah, but to have something every lesson that makes students, you know, work with one other person or asking real questions. And I definitely feel like when I was teaching English as a foreign language and learning, you know, when I did my TEFL course and then I did a master's in applied linguistics as well. So I've got, you know, quite a lot of that sort of pedagogy and stuff. And I remember there was quite a lot of this idea of asking real questions, so real information gap activities, not just I don't not fake ones where actually they already know the answer.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know, what color are your eyes? Well, you're looking at my eyes. You can see what color my eyes are. So, you know, it's something like that you just think, oh, you're just saying these words for the sake of it.
Yeah.
Whereas so thinking about hair and eye color, a real information gap activity is a kind of a guess who type game. So
Yeah.
you have a selection of people and then you choose one of the people and then you say, you can even do it with complete beginners. You can say, do you have blue eyes? Do you have grey eyes? If you want to then make it a little bit more advanced, they can say, does he have blue eyes? Does he have black hair? Then that's a real information gap, isn't it? Because you don't know which person your partner has chosen. And doing that type of activity where they're repeating very similar questions and they're actually getting information from each other, I find is really, really good. And it really helps people because you've got to speak. You can't really get away with just sitting there and just being like, I don't want to do
Mm.
this. If you're in a pair. One of the other things I think is really, really important is giving them time to think about their answers.
Yes.
So sometimes, again, when we feel like really, really pressured with there's so much content that you've got to cover, I do think sometimes we think, oh, we just need to rush through it. And actually, I think that, again, this goes back to what I was saying about creating an atmosphere, you know, a certain type of atmosphere in the classroom, and it takes time. And sometimes you just have to slow down and you just have to take a pause. I mean, I do a lot of teaching online, and silence on a Zoom call is just one of the worst things. But yet sometimes if I have a class and I've set them an activity, I literally will like put a timer on my phone and just pretty much sit on my hands and like cover my mouth because I'm always
Yeah.
so to talk. But yeah, so just having a pause, letting them think of the ideas, even writing ideas down to give them the confidence to then actually say what they want to say without just sort of, you know, immediately picking on somebody in the class who hasn't prepared and just feels like panicked.
Yeah. Mini whiteboards have been suggested for that, like in pairs. And also like depending on the culture as well. Some cultures like are super outgoing and they'll just shout the answer out, whereas some of them have been trained to not speak if they're not 100% sure what the answer is. and they don't want to make a mistake. So yeah, absolutely. Do you know, it's like speaking to a mirror. All of the things you've said are like, I'm like, this is like you said, not afraid to make mistakes. That
Yeah.
takes time. And I always say, I've said this a million times on my podcast, everything is a process.
Mm.
Everything is a process, and you gradually will see results. You just have to stick with it. Trust the process. I know it's one of those kind of cliches, but it's true. And there is no quick fix, and there is no one size fits all. I
I
totally
think
agree.
is such a key point as well,
Mm,
100%. And when people say, well, what's the best way to teach this and what's the best way to teach that? My answer is always, you need to know your class, you need to know your students, you need to know your context. Is it a Friday afternoon or is it a Wednesday morning?
yeah. And I think, like, if anyone's listened to this podcast or one of your training workshops or one of my training workshops, like there is an element of, I can tell you stuff.
Yes. Yeah.
You have to take it and you have to adapt it to your class, still and adapt. And you have to apply it and see what sticks. Because I could tell you exactly what to do and it might bomb because I don't know your class.
Mm. Yeah.
So I know teachers just want like, oh, give me a worksheet, give me this, give me that. Look, I haven't got the headspace. But you do have to put a little bit of thought into it. And it's not necessarily extra planning and preparation in creating things. You just have to spend a few more minutes thinking about things a little bit. How am I going to do this exactly? And I think that's a shift of mindset as well for teachers, because we're constantly looking for activities. What can I do here? What can I do here? No, just take one or two things, but really think about how you can apply it and how you can apply what you've been learning from podcasts, from training sessions, from whatever.
Yeah, very much so. And that's something I talk about quite a lot as well, is the idea of exploiting one text so that you're actually only taking one text for a lesson. I think we're, again, like you were saying, this activity and this activity and and you're finding a text for a listening activity and then you're doing a different text for a reading activity. And then, what should we do for speaking? And actually taking one really good quality text and exploiting it in lots of different ways throughout the lesson and really getting to grips with that one text and thoroughly understanding it and then using it as a springboard to create a writing, piece of writing or speaking or something like that, to me is a lot more effective. And in terms of planning, just saves so much time.
Yeah.
Yes, you've got to find the time to find a good text, but once you start using that kind of planning method, it really works, and that can be adapted across all levels, across all sorts of different types, because you're still doing lots of different activities. So you might do a listening type activity, you might pick out some vocabulary and play a game with the vocabulary from the text and things like that. You might want to translate it if you all have a common first language. There are so many different things you can do. And whenever I talk to people about this, quite a lot of them have a bit of an aha moment and sort of go, oh yeah, I've been trying to find 5 texts for a lesson. And I say, yeah, me too. I did that for years and years. And then gradually, again, and I'm not saying I invented this, it's gradually from listening to people and thinking about it. And, I do have the time and space because I'm not working full time in a school anymore. But yeah, realizing that, oh, hold on a minute. If you've got one really, really good text, it doesn't actually matter if you don't have then a completely different text for your reading or translation. Mm-hmm. So
yeah, I'm a massive fan of dialogues, and if you don't have time, use the audio transcript in the back of the book. Or I very often create, I give ChatGPT some parameters, like 2 Irish students living in Dublin. They're in a cafe. They're talking about their plans for the weekend. Please include the following phrases. Like if we're doing present perfect, I'm not just going to say, please include the present perfect. I'll be like, please include, I've never been here before. Where, have you seen my, and put in those institutionalized phrases. So they're seeing real world language as well. And you can do so much with that. You can cut it up. You can do role play, get them to highlight, the verb phrases. Like there's just, like you say. And I would recommend that people listen to that episode of yours, because I listened to it and I found it very, very useful. And it kind of validated the stuff that I've been doing as well. So that's great.
Was that the episode on
exploiting tech?
Oh, exploiting more
Exploiting
text.
texts.
I
Yeah.
thought you meant, yeah, I did another episode with Joe Dale about chat GPT and AI and things like that. So
Haven't
yeah.
we all?
He's been
He
he's been on
he
everyone's
he
podcast.
gets everywhere. He really does. Got
Well,
to
'cause
admire him.
yeah, no, and he's got so many interesting ideas and interesting things to say. So yeah, definitely. But yeah, the exploiting one text thing, like I say, it's something that I've started thinking about and developing and talking about a lot more. So yeah, I'm glad you found it a useful and interesting episode.
Certainly did. So, is there anything like what kind of things can we do in class to sort of switch things up a bit? We're going to do a bit of a ping pong here.
Hmm.
So, for I'm gonna bat.
Gosh, okay.
Movement. I would say movement is brilliant. Like I try to have some movement in my class. I like this morning with my upper intermediate class, we had some language yesterday. I made some contextualized questions and I put them up around the room and they went around in pairs. And with my beginner class, we just did like prepositions of place and things and furniture. So I wrote cards, put them around the room in pairs. They had to follow the instructions like put your shoes on Hector's desk, put Caroline's book under her desk, put your water bottle next to the teacher's water bottle, take a selfie next to the door. And it was chaos, but it was brilliant. They had a great time. And hopefully there's a bit of memorability there, if that is indeed a word.
I don't know what the word is, but
It
yes,
is now.
that makes sense. That's a brilliant idea. Do you know, it's so funny as well when I think back to when I was teaching English as a foreign language, and I think, yeah, we could, I had maybe like 8 people in a classroom and we could do that kind of thing. And then I'm just imagining a bunch of English 14-year-olds doing that. And I mean, I recommend movement, and then people will say, I literally don't have space in my classroom for the children to.
Yeah.
So, yes, I know. I mean, yeah, it's awful. But one of my favorite games is called the corner game. I talk about this all the time. I love it. Where you choose 4 students and you put one in each corner. And it works really well if you've all got the same first language and you can say an item of vocab or a phrase in the target language and they have to call it out in their first language. I mean, there are all sorts of ways of doing it if you're teaching students from, with all sorts of different language backgrounds. I'm just trying to think off the top of my head now because I've never played it in that context, but you could, if you're practicing tenses, for example, you could say a sentence in English in a tense and they have to tell you what tense it is. Or you could even maybe say the tense and they have to say a sentence in that tense. The thing is, it's all about calling out as fast as you possibly can, not putting your hand up because everyone can just put their hand up. So it's actually calling out the answer as fast as they can. The one who gets the answer first then moves from one corner to the next corner. If there's somebody in that corner, then they get knocked out and they sit down. And the idea is to move around, all the corners and knock everybody else out. And then it's the last person standing is the winner. And I have recommended that to people who've said, I literally would not be able to do that in my classroom because there's not enough space. So,
okay.
And then if you get 2 in diagonal corners, then you just do a kind of sudden death because otherwise they can end up chasing each other around the classroom and just always ending up in an empty corner. So,
okay, gotcha.
Yeah.
I quite like mini circles. Great with low levels. So, like as a warmer, could take 5 minutes. They're more or less in a circle. We're in a kind of a horseshoe. So I'd turn my head to the right and I'd look at the first student there and I'd say A, and he has to go B and then C, D, and it goes around. And if anyone makes a mistake, we have to start again. A, and they go all the way around because they still haven't quite got the hang of some of the tricky vowels. Or I might look at him and go 7. And the next person has to say 14 and the next one has to say 21. And it's hilarious because some of them are great at maths and some of them are like, oh God. And it's brilliant for numbers because numbers are very tricky. And another one you could do is use a small piece of language and go around in a circle. So I introduced, I brought in a packet of biscuits, wrote it on the board, would you like a biscuit? And then, yes, please. So I handed it to my student on the right. He had to ask the next student, would you like a biscuit? Yes, please. They took it and they went around in a circle, all asking each other, would you like a biscuit? They all got a biscuit.
Right.
And the next week we did, would you like an Easter egg? Because it was Easter. and then actually took them to another classroom and they had to do it to students in another class. They were absolutely crapping themselves. But we drilled it and drilled it and drilled it, and they all went in and they all did it. They all spoke and said, "Would you like an Easter egg?" Came out delighted with themselves. So you could
No,
take any.
yeah, sorry. I was just going to say, I love this idea because asking questions as well is something that's always picked up on as something that students don't do enough of. And for, again, thinking back to if you're preparing for exams, for the GCSE exam, for example, they have to do role plays and they do actually have to ask questions. So
Yeah.
being able to ask, would you like in the target language is, that's such a good idea. And then they get a sweet or a biscuit or a
Yeah.
bit of Easter egg or something. Yeah.
Yeah, you can
Absolutely.
never practice question forms enough, and even if it's just input. So even if you're doing like, is there a chair in the classroom? Is there a wardrobe in the classroom? Is there a cinema in the classroom? That exposure to that specific structure, input flooding, they have to get so much input at that low level. You cannot practice question forms enough, is my takeaway from that.
Okay, I have a question for you actually, because
Oh,
like I said, I teach a lot of teachers who aren't very confident themselves in the target language. I don't know whether you came across that in French Guiana or whether you have come across that before. Do you have any tips and ideas for them?
French Guiana, their quality of language was actually very good. But I have done a lot of teacher training with Spanish, French, Hungarian, Czech teachers, Italians. And yeah, they do have a lack of confidence in their accent and they're like, how can I improve? And I would say, well, I'll give you the same advice I give my students. What are you interested in? Go and watch a YouTube video, see how the language is updated. Why don't you go on TikTok? Perfect place to update your language skills, surely. I mean, FOMO, I don't know what the kids are saying now, but like this is the kind of language you're more likely to hear. So I think social media would be a brilliant solution. Movies, I mean, what would you recommend for your students? I would say just do exactly the same, but on a slightly more advanced level.
Yeah, and actually to go back to the idea of culture, that is another thing.
Mm,
If you haven't studied a language, I studied French and German at university, so I learned loads. I did loads of literature. I know loads about French and German history, and colonial history, lots of that kind of thing. But yeah, but again, for people who are only picking up a language as an adult and they don't have that background, they've not been to the countries, they don't really know it very well. So actually, but that ties in really well with if you're watching films, if you're watching TV shows and things like that, then you're getting more of an idea of what the country's like and the culture and things like that.
yeah.
So,
And I
yeah.
think like with Netflix and Amazon Prime,
Mm.
you can find a series in pretty much any major language. What do you think about like positivity? If I just say positivity to you, how would you incorporate that into a class?
These are some great, really great questions. Um, I mean, for teachers, I think some teachers
Oh,
are lacking a bit of positivity at the moment in particular, which is quite hard. But I think in terms of students, it goes back to what I was saying about creating a certain kind of an atmosphere in the class as well. But we do have to be careful with praise, don't we? I think overpraising and just always being, really positive and might be quite off-putting to some students. And it also, they kind of see through it and they think, oh, yeah, okay, it wasn't that good. Like, why is she so over the top?
yeah, I think there's a tendency, and I'm sure you've seen it as well. There are different kinds of teachers, but very rarely do you see the person in the classroom. There's
Mm.
someone else. And obviously there has to be a line, but I'm very much about being myself if I can. And obviously, if you've got a great class, it's easier to lean into that. But I do find the more myself I am, the more crack we have, the more they respond to me. And I think that a lot of teachers forget, crack a joke, take the piss. I mean, like, one of my students is always late. One of my beginner students is always late back from the break because he smokes a cigarette. So every single like, you okay, Banda? Been smoking? Yeah. Was it nice? Did you have a good time? Like, how are you, and everyone cracks a joke and laughs as long as it's not, he's a joker as well, so it's not like embarrassing, but again, getting to know your students and cracking a joke. I think there's
And
so much to be said for that.
yeah, and letting them get to know you. I mean, you don't have to tell them the
Yes.
absolute, private details of your life, but I don't know, talk about your family a little bit, or talk about your pet, or tell them something about your house, or, I don't think we have to be completely secretive about our lives, I mean, yeah. So I think, but that helps. It really helps the relationships. And I think the key to all teaching is relationships between the people in the group,
Yes, yes, absolutely.
creating positive relationships,
Yeah.
100%.
And back to your point about like revealing a bit of yourself. The good thing is with language teachers is everyone's learnt a language. I'm sure you've got a bunch of stories that you can relate to your students about a time when you said something completely inappropriate, when you were just asking for like a portion of chips or something like that. I have a particularly embarrassing story that I will tell you when we switch off the record, when I was in Germany. But yeah, and my husband features quite heavily in my class. I'm always mentioning him. So they all know I'm married. But like, I said this in my last episode, I think, and it comes from another episode I did. And it's entitled When Trust is Built, Learning Happens. So
Mm.
showing a bit of yourself, showing a little bit of vulnerability, as RuPaul says, vulnerability is what makes us fall in love with you. If you can just show that you're human, you're going to get a lot more back from your students, because they're not just going to see you as a teacher. They're going to see you as, wait for it, a person. Who knew, you know?
Yeah, yeah. I actually used to teach, well, for a year or so, I actually taught in the school where I was a pupil. And I think that was quite interesting because, again, in England, quite a lot of students think, well, I can't learn a foreign language because I'm English. So I think just seeing somebody who came from the local area who had learnt foreign languages and had lived abroad and then was teaching them, I think made them realize that, oh, maybe that's something that I could do as well, So, and just telling them like, that guy who's your maths teacher, he was my maths teacher when I was 16, or whatever. And like, finding those connections with them. And, I know a lot of people will find connections about sports teams or anything like that. Yeah.
Okay, I could talk to you for hours, but I think we should call it a day. We're both knackered, but I've really enjoyed this conversation. I think it's been really interesting and very useful for whoever's listening. I think they can take a lot away from this. So I just want to say thank you very much, Kate, for your time. And where can people find you?
Well, yeah, thank you so much for having me, Erin. I agree. I could talk to you for hours, but I think I would say the best place to find me is Instagram or Facebook, and I'm Kate Languages on both. So it's very easy to find me on there, and then you can kind of explore my website and all sorts from there. So at Kate Languages on Instagram and search for Kate Languages on Facebook.
Okay, and I'll put your website on the show notes as well.
That'd
Just
be
in
brilliant.
case people don't have social media, because not everybody does.
No, they don't. I'm actually converting everything to a new website, but the web address should remain katelanguages.co.uk. So yes, but it's all it's all a bit all over the place at the moment. But yeah.
Well, I think everybody can relate to that sentence in some way or another.
Yes, life in general. So
All
yeah,
right.
thank you so much, Erin. It's been really, really great to talk to you.
Thank you very much.